They've called a climate emergency. I've been doing that for quite some time. But what are they doing about it, other than installing solar panels and selling EVs at very high prices and disrupting the world's economy for that behalf? All well and good if that's your the corporate role in that is to keep itself and the players in the technological field in profits through the process of doing something about climate. Now, what a climate emergency is to one person may not be an emergency to others, but identifying what the emergency is. What is the emergency? The climate may change. Well, earthquakes may destroy California any time. That is a greater imminent emergency that may destroy California. This is a probability. It's undeniable. It has that great big fault line, and it can happen. So, concern itself about climate when that may become earlier than the disaster climate change may be. It's just it depends on how you see the world, how you feel about such things as a climate emergency. But the thing is, it is an emergency in the fact that we've seen in Australia the destructive rains that came through various causes, that food supplies or food shortages can be created anywhere and everywhere at any time by the weather, regardless of the causes of the weather. Regardless of the causes of climatic events, it is the result of that, the food shortages, that is the emergency. You've got to identify what the emergency actually is. It's not good saying there's an emergency and not being specific about what that may be. Now, the worst thing to do in any societal crisis is to sit there and do nothing and not be busy. Far wiser to be creative and active in regards to any crisis and be productive in dealing with what that crisis is. And in this case, I suggest it's food shortages. It's the running out of food in places where there are great populations. And that is a catastrophe in itself, regardless of the cause. Because throughout history, massive droughts have come along. A few thousand years ago, big droughts come along. Ice ages came along. Things can happen that we have got no control over. And you can't suddenly change everyone out of petrol-using cars and diesel cars into EVs overnight. It's impossible, no matter what people want. That gets down to food itself. That is the absolute emergency, because people need to eat regardless of what they drive. It is therefore something missing then in the politics and the corporate aims in regard to this climate emergency, and that is the lack of organisation in growing organic food, using as many people as possible, recycling water, for taking water from the air, using hydroponics. That, to me, if they haven't been doing that already in this reset, whatever it is, this Build Back Better, whatever it is, they promote it politically and corporate, through the corporate media. If they're not promoting the idea of getting as many people working as possible, whether they're jabbed or not, surely people deserve to be fed if they're willing to work for their food, regardless of the corporate disposition or political disposition towards that. It can be that whole thing about climate change is about driving a car, an EV, or buying the high-tech wind and solar, when the focus on food supply, which means the hydrology, actually the water supply, has to be organised accordingly for as many, and to get as many people working. They don't have to be, it's not like slavery or communism. It's working a 22-hour week should suffice if people are organised well enough into projects that then produce food. Because having a parallel system, I've mentioned this in another video, having a parallel system to the corporate food production system is a great safeguard in case of the climate. We cannot determine the future of the climate on Earth, nor can we determine the future of food security through broadacre or corporate farming. There is no determination, no assurance that within 15 years those crops or those lands are unviable because of the way they've been cropping them. So without a parallel, if you go to China, food's grown everywhere. I mean, there seems to be an ignorance of what happens in China, and it's all about global political problems involving that, which have been ongoing. But we still ignore the fact that China is extremely productive when it comes to food. You go there, everyone's eating, and then they must have problems. But amazingly, they grow food along the railway tracks, and everywhere you go to a university, there's food growing everywhere in the university because everyone's busy growing food. Because at one stage, those people are really, really hungry, and they know that starvation can come at any time, and that is a warning to everyone. And the fact that governments aren't acting on growing organic food, using volunteers, participants, no good getting people there if they don't want to work. But this suggests, although they're pushing the climate thing as an emergency, they're not taking the real emergency, which is food supply, seriously. Because food supply and hydrology is the key to surviving climate change, no matter where you live. If you live in the deserts in Arabia, the people there are putting their oil wealth into developing means of growing food in arid regions by using water, by desalinating water from the sea and pumping it inland and letting that and using that. And they're using different. The Jews have just become brilliant in Israel. Have become brilliant at growing food in arid lands and using the willingness of the people to participate, because there's a national spirit rather than a division. You've got to have a national spirit going for people to work and be occupied, because the most important thing to be is occupied through a crisis, doing something productive and proactive and positive and pragmatic towards your own survival as well as the survival of society. So when they call a climate emergency, and we've been watching this for years, the question is, have they done much at all in regards to what the real emergency almost would be, and that is the organic food supply? I mean, it's very, very important to keep the biomass into its correct environmental and symbiotic natural order. It's no good saying, the overuse of fossil fuels is damaging the planet, and then contradict that by allowing massive broadacre farming using monocultures, which then is a total contradiction in if you like, in philosophy. From a philosophical point of view, or logical point of view, a rational point of view, it's a contradiction not to have mass organic food growing, what employs people who want to, 22-hour a week. It's not slavery or anything like that. It's about being active, innovative and creative for your own well-being, psychologically, mentally and physically, and also you end up with something called food, which is edible and organic, so it's not bad for you. So the whole thing is about being positive through climate change rather than just totally negative and it only being about motor cars and wind and solar and everything produced somewhere else, because people can no longer produce these goods in the countries that rely totally on the material system to subsist. So it's just another look at what is the emergency in this climate and the politics, corporate politics of climate change.